we welcome you to Beyond the Norm with Chip Reichenthal. An exercise in truths just too cool to ignore. A chance to realize many things taught us may actually be wrong, yet new outlooks could benefit us all going forward in our lives. Time to prove what I've known all along, that each of you listening is even more awesome, incredible, and unique than already thought. Each an important and vital part of our world and universe. From the great minds at Victims of Retail comes Beyond the Norm with Chip Reichenthal. And now, time for our host of Beyond the Norm, Mr. Chip Reichenthal. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Norm with Chip Reichenthal. Not too egocentric a piece there. That's an introduction. But I will tell you something. First of all, it's so great to have you with us. And boy, we've been lining up some guests for this tonight's broadcast and future broadcasts, and what a lineup we've got for you. I'm going to mention some of that as well as the guests we have tonight. And I am so honored to have this guy with us. His name is Danny Searle. He comes to us from Australia, and he has this beautiful ability to take some very unique concepts and put them in pretty plain terms in a very interesting yet nurturing manner. And we're going to learn a lot about Ascension and some other wonderful topics tonight. We're so honored to have you with us. Now, I've been covering paranormal topics on radio for a while now. I got into it since I saw and spoke with my childhood best friend at the time of his death, even though he was all the way across the country, and it inspired me to study afterlife sciences. And in doing so, I found that A, there's a difference between being religious and being spiritual, yet even after noting the difference, an open mind was essential to gaining traction in efforts to get answers about the dead. And B, the true difference between heaven and hell in the afterlife has a great deal to do with your personal beliefs. Now, tonight we're really going to a place much more spiritual than religious, but in going there, it doesn't mean that I know better, or what you believe in doesn't matter, or especially that it doesn't matter to me. Now, I have no plans to be separatist or exclusive to you or your religious beliefs, so I ask for the similar respect in listening to what my guests and I discuss here on this program through the weeks. I watched a lot of videos about astounding ideas or unknown history or things regarding science, religion, conspiracy, star seeds, light bearers, ascended beings, ghosts and spirits, UFOs, and new theories on all of those and more. Next week, we're proud to have our next show, actually, which is in 2 weeks. We're proud to have with us Dr. William Tiller. Now, he's a theoretical physicist that examines spiritual things. We'll have Lloyd Auerbach next month. We've got a film producer friend who's going to talk about Freemasonry in weeks to come, and more of our greatest thinkers and theorists in the future. Now, last show, we had Coriel Kramer, a very gifted spirit medium and animal sensitive. And for this show, we're going to take those concepts a step further. Some of the concepts we discussed tonight come from a perspective outside of traditional religion, but I must say it comes from a place of hope, of nurturing guidance, healing principles, and loving grace. On this program, it's always about love, grace, kindness, and a unity with the good forces in nature. It's hard sometimes to accept the idea that two people, both kind, giving, and spiritual, will only find heaven's grace if they pray the exact same way. And I feel driven to help others find hope, and I've come to embrace an ideal that talks of ascension, to find inner peace and outer harmony, to try to live in service of others, away from ego and pride, toward love, light, and humility. And I think tonight's guest gives me something to aspire toward. This is a real terrific honor for me to have such a gifted guest as Danny Searle, hailing all the way from Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. Now, he has a very great gift for explaining things, as I mentioned earlier, that might find difficult or unusual to understand, and in doing so he enhances many topics that are most fascinating, including human origin, the blue star prophecy, new findings on DNA and genealogy, and how to tell how old your soul is based on your personality traits and characteristics. His acumen is phenomenal, and for some, may require a special perspective. Now, the main topic bridging his knowledge together is something called Ascension. The goal is a unified existence that crosses generations, species, time, family, nature, the universe, with a goal of helping each other and ourselves in unconditional love and acceptance. Essentially, there was a major movement last year, right around December 21st, 2012 prophecy, the Mayan calendar seemed to bring about, where the energy is changing. Rather than watching the destruction of us all, some felt a strong calling to be healers, doing the work of angels. In times perhaps bringing us closer to end of days, many felt a pull to embrace goodness and light, to balance out times where evil seems to be everywhere. In metaphysics, this doesn't sound at all strange or unfamiliar, and in paranormal fields, many have heard of or embraced such principles. Some of us feel as though they come from very distant lands or even planets. Some of us feel like we've been here many times before, in different lives. It's a strange yet beautiful place to be, especially if it inspires one to help others and embrace others as equals, regardless of background, status, and ethnicity. For me, a long while ago, I felt a strong urge to try and learn how to communicate with the discarnate spirits of those no longer with us, what many may call spirit medium. But I sought out this gift on my own, as I found in talking with many psychics and mediums, opinions really differ on some very fundamental things, even more so if they are brought up in conventional organized religion. I discovered very early on that religion only plays a role if it was important to the spirit you hope to talk with. But you really have to take your mind to very unusual places, in ideals much different than the norm. Let's say beyond the norm, or the common popular ideals that transcend human history even before the times of our religious prophets, and also look beyond scientific principles. In my personal experience, unconditional acceptance was imperative or necessary to embrace, and with that came the idea that we may have actually lived several lifetimes, where each lifetime is a lesson or lessons that are required to learn. The more we learn, the higher our soul level reaches, until the pinnacle, which is a oneness with God, whatever that may mean to you, and once reached, we can remain in the soul plane of existence, either to aid or teach those living on, to counsel, or to remain in that total state of God, a oneness where everything that exists has a value and is integral. Your state of mind is one of a utopian or nirvana in nature. Now, I did work on the novel recently, the science fiction that touched on alien invasion, while utilizing some of the latest theories on physics, cellular biology, and genetics, conspiracy theory, theories of our origin and the universe, and many have wild videos all about those juicy topics. Many of my upcoming guests are theorists in quantum physics and science, historians on origin, whether it was a terrific accident of miracles or hybrid from outer species. And some of the finest in all these categories will be guests in the coming weeks. But Danny Searle, our honored guest tonight, has several videos that cover some of these topics, most of them really, with grace, great teaching ability, and also shares the true wonders behind some of these. By the way, I did reach my goal of accurate mediumship, at least for a time, and came away from the trials and experiences feeling I gained a completely loving perspective. Now, Danny has some videos that delve into soul age, which means, in the premise of indeed living several lives for several lessons, how far along are you in this lifetime? 2 times in my life I felt as though someone spoke to me in ways magnificent, like they completely knew my inner thoughts and perspectives, even ones I hide from others, and his soul age video about old souls was one. A past life regression I did on myself was the other, but both had hinted that I may indeed have been around for many, many lifetimes. Most important from what I learned in Danny's videos is that there is a reason other than living with pain that has me detaching from others, even if and when I care about them so deeply. Kind of a been there, done that scenario, where it's easier to just separate myself completely from the here and now, and sometimes, especially when my pains drive me there, it's truly nothing personal when I detach from others, including best friends, wife, loves, family, and dear friends. It keeps me grounded even if most think of me as anything but. I am tired, and I do want to go home when it's my time to do so, and I really think this may be my last earthbound lifetime. Perhaps I feel the urge to talk to the dead because I want so much to counsel them. Perhaps since that is indeed what I will do beyond this lifetime, And I think my calling still lies elsewhere in this realm, like writing, or represented forward-thinking science or theory, or holding spirit in positive light, or counseling the living. But it's times like when I see Danny Searle's videos on YouTube, on his channel known as Path to Ascension, where I can look excitedly and say, hey, this guy knows what I want to learn about in ways that are gentle, guiding, nurturing, and ultimately positive. Here's a man who I feel has ascended and can help us listening learn more about the art and how to reach it. I, for one, am very proud and excited to share with you the vast and wonderful knowledge of Mr. Danny Searle, all the way from Australia. So let's bring him on now. Good evening, Daniel, or should I say to you, good morning, and welcome to Beyond the Norm.
Yes, it is morning here. Thank you very much, Chip, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, it's a true honor to have you with us, and I was really trying to, get the point across of how excited I am by watching your work, at least on YouTube, and some of the work you've done. I think in some of the topics you deal with has a better take and an easier to understand feel about them than any other videos on any of those topics I've seen. So first and foremost, I want to congratulate you on those and ask you what inspired you to make them.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Look, basically, I was for a long time doing a series of workshops similar to what are in the videos, the topics and things like that. And leading up to 2012, this probably started about 1998. I actually started doing a lot of these talks and things.
Wow.
Because I felt it was very important that people out there knew, what was going on, what was coming, and what they could do. And it was actually a friend of mine who inspired me to do the YouTube videos because, I was sort of frustrated at the time that I was doing workshops with maybe 30 to 50 people at a time, but I just felt that, I needed to get out to more. And she actually said to me, well, why don't you make a YouTube video? And I thought, yeah, why don't I? I'd never thought of that. So, yeah, that's how it started. And basically with the videos, I had to learn how to make the videos as I went. And so, you'll notice that the earlier ones are pretty basic and then they get a little bit more flashy and nicer, as I progress and learn about how to make videos.
Yeah, even with the, the ones you think of as plainer, I've dabbled with video editing myself, so I thought even the ones that you might think of as rather plain were still done very well. You got some fades and wipes and all nice transitions, and you selected some very interesting photographs to make some of your points and kind of make it gives it an easier feel. Both in emotional tone and in knowledgeable tone, and I appreciate that. Of course, for our dear listeners, this is kind of an inside joke, so I at least want to urge them when they have a chance to check out YouTube, and Danny's channel is called Path to Ascension, and that is, I should spell that, ASCENSION. Because on my banner it came out misspelled. So I want to make sure they find you the right way. Now, some of the video topics, you have a whole couple of streams of videos dealing with Ascension. But before we get into that and the Soul Ages, which we kind of promoted, I wanted to ask you just in a general sense, aside from those streams of videos, what is your general take and feel about Ascension and what got you interested in the path to Ascension?
Okay, well, it's a long story, I suppose. I'll try and make it short. Look, basically, I have been in contact with what I call my guides. Other people call angels, other people call, other things, since I was a very young child. And basically leading up to that point in 1998 I was talking about, there was a lot of things going on in the world and I was getting a lot of information, a lot of what I call like downloads. I'd go to bed at night and I would wake up the next morning feeling like I'd been at work all night, and suddenly I had all this knowledge in my head just swimming around, and I had to get it out. And so I started to write it down and stuff, and then present it. Because we are coming up to a unique period in the history of the Earth. No time in the history of the Earth, and the Earth is a lot older, by the way, than what people think it is. But at no point in the history of the planet has it ascended to a higher state or higher vibrational state. And this happens maybe once every couple of million years in the universe. So it's a very rare event. So a lot of souls, even what one would call aliens or whatever, they've all been lining up to come here. And it's funny because, when people say, oh, it's so hard here, it's difficult, world's in a terrible state, there are literally thousands of really advanced souls busting to get here. They want to be here and experience this as it happens. Now, the whole 2012 thing, the date itself is arbitrary. It's neither here nor there. What it was a celestial event, and the celestial event was when we lined up with the center of the galaxy. The center of the galaxy lined up, and it was the completion of what we call the precession of the equinox. That's just one complete lap around the galaxy, okay, when our solar system goes around the galaxy once. So it's a really big galaxy. It's 26 light years across. So that event basically lined everything up, and think of it like a bunch of cogs that all line up and suddenly a door opens. And that's what happened in December 2012. If at that point the whole world, well, not the whole world, a quarter of the world had have embraced in unconditional love for literally 1 second, the whole planet would have ascended. It would have been enough to take everyone up. Unfortunately, and this is why I had to talk about soul ages, because I say that unfortunately, not unfortunately, just at the moment, the planet is predominantly inhabited by younger souls. Yes. And, they're on their learning curve and their lessons, and they're here to do what they do. So because of that, the system that's controlled by the younger souls inundated people with all these fear things, that, the Mayan calendar, and it's going to be the end of the world, right, and it's, everything's going to blow up and everything's going to do this or that, or they made fun of it, or they, there was all these different things going on, and that muddied the waters and it confused the issues and stuff. But it wasn't a complete failure, because I'm sure you've seen it, and a lot of people have seen it. We've seen incredible change going on around the planet at the moment. All these people protesting all over the world, and they're suddenly kicking out these corrupt governments and things, and people are starting to stand in their power. And as bad as things look like they are in the world, there's also a lot of good things going on that most people probably don't get to hear about. Right. But I'm a bit of a news hound, so I check these things down. That's one of the reasons
we have you on tonight, there, good sir. Because that's one of the reasons we have you on tonight, good sir. Because we get to talk about some of those good things. I will share briefly along the lines of what you're talking about, because John Tobin, who's kind enough to produce tonight, and I have a show called Keeping the Spirits Alive. We've been dealing with paranormal topics for a long time, and there's a lot of fear-based motive in the entertainment industry, because people are used to horror films, and they're kind of lumping the ghost hunter TV shows here in the States with horror films. The producers are. The viewers know better. But John and I have been trying to add, there are a lot of positive aspects to the paranormal, and just in some of the sciences and some of the metaphysical things that you've hinted at while explaining, your motive for being such a wonderful guy. And yes, we do want to take the opportunity to show the positive side of things. So I just wanted to at least let you know that we're trying, but it is hard to compete with all the fear going on in government, in politics, in religion, in entertainment, and the media, and what they call reality-based television, which basically teaches bad behavior and encourages even more fear. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, that's absolutely. The system is completely based on fear. It's a fear-based mentality. And people should understand, too, that fear means more than just being afraid of something. It's behaviours like jealousy, greed, self-harm, things like that. They're all fear, what we call fear-based mentalities.
Yeah,
and as I say in the videos, there's only two emotions. There's only love and fear. That's it. Everything else is just branched out from those two root emotions.
Yeah, I actually borrowed that ideal that I saw in your videos and used them in some editorial pieces on some of the radio shows in earlier weeks. And I think it's very important that people know that, It's also, I think, based on what they believe will happen, can actually change matter. It changes the way things and matter occurs with them and around them. Based on their own belief, I don't think people realize how powerful their personal belief structures are on the world around them and the universe. And highlighting that there's only those two sources of emotions, either fear or love, and everything stems from either one or the other, is a very important, I think, thing for our listeners to know.
No, absolutely. And, what you were sort of touching on then is a thing called the field. We are all connected via what they term as the field, okay? So if you're resonating... See, thought is the most powerful thing in the universe, regardless of what anyone thinks, nuclear bombs, hydrogen bombs, whatever. No, thought is the most powerful thing in the universe. And in fact, the whole universe itself was created from thought. I won't go into that now, but the point is, if you're resonating a certain thought process that's one in fear, for example, that's what you will attract to yourself, and that's what you put out into the world.
Right.
And so all the fear vibrations all like to link up together, as do all the love vibrations. So the most common thing I hear from people all the time is when they suddenly start on the spiritual path, right? Something always happens. The first thing they say to me is, all the people I used to hang around with or were friends with for the last 10 years, 20 years, I no longer see them anymore. I'm no longer in contact with them anymore. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I've made all these new friends that are just so full of light. They're so happy, they're beautiful, they're wonderful. Yeah. And, that's a classic statement because it's purely because like attracts like. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I've come to understand. I did a rather long piece at the beginning of the show, talking about trying to work in communicating with the dead. Something that really got me ostracized from my community a long time ago. But I ended up being surrounded, like you said, by like-minded people, and I had a tendency from learning the things that I learned in the aspects of afterlife communication, that it's the same way in the afterlife or in death. Like-mindedness is what you're surrounded with. So it's possible that there is a personal heaven for everyone. And again, it goes into that belief thing. But you did mention... I wanted to touch on one of the things you said a few minutes ago and share with you that we've been talking even with some of the paranormalists about collective consciousness. And we actually tried, for John Tobin here, the guy who's producing tonight and hosts the next show along with myself. For his birthday, we got everybody to focus on wishes and prayers for John for his birthday, so he could have a great day and a great year ahead. And we tried the experiment of collective consciousness just to get a group of like-minded people to focus on something, because it sure would be nice if you could get everybody in the planet, like you said, to focus on loving thoughts for only a minute. It's a minute. Then we could ascend the entire planet. And I think that, we're even with all the madness and hysterics that seem to be all around us, we could have that minute, I think, and maybe ascend the planet. I think that's possible. But I was wondering how you felt about collective consciousness.
Oh, yeah, well, basically what I said, but just a point on that, it's not just all the crazy stuff and the fear. There's another issue, I suppose, in, younger souls and things like that. It's what I call the busy mind, okay? So you say it's just a minute, but what happens is the first thing that pops into people's head is all these questions like, oh, it's just a minute. Oh, but what if the phone rings? Or what if this happens? Oh, I've got to make sure I get my kids from school. I've got to do this. They've always got an excuse or what I call a busy mind.
Right.
And that's not a criticism. It's just how it is.
It is what it is. Yep.
Yeah. And I suppose, that's why I'm a big, big promoter of meditation. If you want to change the way you think, if you want to change your auric field and the way that you interact with that collective consciousness that you're talking about, the best way to do it, I've experienced, is meditation. Mm-hmm. If you meditate for 20 minutes per day.
Oh, what a difference.
It makes a massive difference, right? And suddenly that busy mind goes away and the calm mind takes over. Mm-hmm. The rational mind takes over. Yep. And so a minute in that consciousness is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. I mean, I can meditate for an hour. I come out of it and I think, it only felt like 5 minutes. I look at the clock and it was an hour.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I would like to add, interestingly enough, the Heart Math Institute, which is a really wonderful organization, had essentially printed something that I think you would love to hear, which is that they discovered that the biggest organ in your body that has the most electrical output, and I always thought it was the brain. It just seems to make sense. It's all neurons firing all the time. There's liquid and solid, and it's surrounded by electromagnetic auric energy, and one would think that's got to be the highest electrical output organ in the body. But no, according to the Heart Math Institute, it is the heart that actually creates the highest electrical output, and this is both physically speaking and metaphysically speaking, auric or scientific. But they say, like in a meditative state, as you mentioned, where the heart and mind are unified in a loving, relaxed vibration, that is the highest electrical output we could possibly put out, and I think people, even common sense would make us think that maybe a state of anger or panic, or an epiphany-like situation would be, the highest output. But no, it's at a relaxed, loving, positive vibration where the heart and mind are at one. And I think that really adds to the need, I think, for more people to find peace and relaxation in a meditative state.
Yeah, for sure. I often talk in terms to people about making decisions from the heart or living from the heart. And I don't mean literally the muscle that's the heart. What you were talking about, living from the heart or consciously thinking from the heart, it is that union between, the core of your being with the mind, and they meld together. And when those two unite, again, it's a very powerful resonance and a powerful energy. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with chakras, the chakra system, but it's basically like, an energy system within. Oh, sorry, you still there?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I just had another call come in. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
No, very familiar with chakras. A lot of our listeners are too.
Oh, good. Yeah, because there's a major heart chakra there, which is one of your major vortexes, and it's the beginning of the higher chakras. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And once you learn to open that chakra, then suddenly, that's when everything starts coming together for you.
Yes.
And just touching too on, your interest in the paranormal and things like that. If I've seen the ghost hunters and things like that. I understand that they're trying to do it from a scientific point of view, and they're trying to, using empirical data to quantify the existence of the spirits and the spirit world and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it would be nice to see them occasionally have a medium, or I don't know, not even a medium, just someone that works through those higher chakras, because suddenly you become sensitive to other spirits and things in the room, and ghosts, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. Just purely by operating through those higher chakras, you will automatically open up a whole new world, and that new world, it's there all the time. And I say to people, it's like, when you're on a radio station and you dial up on the radio and you hear one station playing, and then you dial it back down and you hear another station playing. All the stations are there, but you're only listening to the one that you're tuned into. Right. And then the same is in the world that we live in now. There's multi-layers of it. And what you're doing when you're dealing with the paranormal is you're tuning into a different frequency. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm just saying that if you're living and working in those higher chakras, it becomes really simple, really easy to just tune into those higher frequencies.
Yeah, and like-minded ones, so you're not going to get all those nasty demonic things that everybody pertains to portray on the television shows. No, it's a very loving process, and I think that wouldn't make for good TV, unfortunately.
No, it wouldn't. And as far as the demonic things go, right? If you seriously, I've done this so many times. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is project pink light out of your heart chakra, and the demons, or whatever you want to call them, they absolutely run to the hills. Right. They are petrified. They are petrified of the light and love. They are absolutely petrified by it. So if you ever find yourself, see what people do. They instill fear into your mind and into that core, that primordial part of your brain. Mm-hmm. And they're working on the mind, not the spirit. So allow the spirit to come through and just remember, hang on, I'm more beautiful than these things. And right. Just project light and love at them, and bang, they're gone.
Yeah, and they are gone. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they're also stronger than those things.
Oh, heaps stronger, a lot stronger. That's my point. They just try and trick you. They try and trick you by getting into your mind and, sort of try and... It's smoke and mirrors. That's all it is. It's smoke and mirrors with them beings. Yeah. There's no power. They got no power at all.
No, they really don't. And interestingly, I for a time, about 5 years, worked with schizophrenics in a non-profit setting. I taught computer skills to schizophrenics, and when these folks came into my classroom, they were pretty raw. Maybe they had decompensated or fell off their meds for a while and ended up, hospitalized. And from the hospital, they'd take them to the place where I worked to kind of to get them back into society a little slow, with other schizophrenics and people that had no fear of them. And I think that there's a lot of similarities, really, between ghosts, spirits, and schizophrenics, in that the stigmas about and against them are just so vast. I mean, I would talk to these students, and they were sweet. They were honest with me, even when they were starting to fall out a little bit. They'd come up and say, hey, I was kind of thinking that maybe you were CIA there, Chip. And I'd say, no, the CIA wouldn't take me. I couldn't lie that well, But thank you. I was kind of touched that they thought enough about me to at least address that privately to me, rather than putting them in a straitjacket and calling 911, which is that's our emergency line here. That's and there's so much treatment like that in the mental health field. It was really hard to see. But I think anything, if you approach with love in your heart and respect and compassion, then I think angry people won't strike out at you. Unpopular people will feel popular. And, a lot of things can be accomplished with that kind of approach that I think is part of Ascension.
Yeah. Just on schizophrenics, but I've done a bit of work myself with them and studied it. Now, the quick version is basically 99.9% of schizophrenics have a malevolent spirit, or whatever you want to call it, attached to their aura, sucking them dry. The reason why I can prove that it's not physiological as such is because if you study twins, like DNA identical twins, okay, there's many, many cases where one twin has schizophrenia and the other one doesn't. And what they find is there's two large ventricles in the back of the neck, back of the head, in the neck area, right, where the blood veins go through. The one with schizophrenia, these things have swelled up to the size of peas, you know, and in the normal twin, they're just normal, you know, the size of spaghetti sort of thing, okay? So basically what it is, when people, particularly teenagers, right, where they're going through hormonal changes and things like that, when they get depressed, they'll go to alcohol, drugs, those sort of things. You leave yourself open and, you know, basically susceptible to demonic, whatever you want to call them, bad spirits attaching themselves. Because the only way that these spirits can feel physical things, right, they yearn for the physical. They yearn for tobacco and for sex and for drugs and alcohol and things like that, right? They still yearn for those things, but they're stuck in a spirit world, so they haven't got a physical body. So the only way that they can experience it is literally by tapping into someone who's got a physical body. And people that are drug addicts and alcoholics and things like that, during those periods when they're drunk or drugged, their aura diminishes. It really shrinks down really low. So think of it like a force field around you. So suddenly your force field's down. So they take that opportunity and bang, they jump on you. And then they start putting the ideas in your head, have more drugs, have more this, have more that. Right. And the poor person's mind inside is trapped there. And then, it's a long story, but, you know,
I love that you're saying that, and I think that's fascinating, and it's also great to hear somebody else say it, especially somebody from across the world. You know, there was also just recently from the psychiatric world, and rarely does really impressive stuff. I shouldn't finish that sentence, but let me just say that. Physiological research is starting to show the difference in schizophrenia, and now they're separating a lot of cases and calling them temporal lobe epilepsy instead. It's kind of a similar but different thing. And a lot of your work discusses the pineal gland, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But they were saying, the psychiatric world is now saying that they've discovered something, I'm not sure if it's a gene or a neural firing, but the main thing is the difference between your inner dialogue and outer dialogue is broken. So it's somewhere really in the central nervous system, where the two brain halves connect in there, which I think would be in the stem near the pineal gland. But that said, even the Psychiatric Institute, the world is saying that it's the difference between your inner voice and your outer voice. You know?
Yeah, well, that is the pineal gland. The pineal gland, think of it like an antenna. It's a wireless antenna to the spirit world, okay? It's the conduit between the physical world and the spiritual world. So in highly trained mediums and things like that, they have attuned their pineal gland to such a point they literally switch it on and off to go in and out of the physical and the spiritual. And what I was talking about before, that's the exact point where these demonic beings come in via the pineal gland, and that's literally where the blockage is, exactly where the blockage is, because they're now got their foot in the door, basically, and they won't let the door shut. So these people are experiencing, what we would think a dream state or it doesn't make sense. It's not rational. Well, it's not, because in the spirit world there's no laws of physics there, okay? Time doesn't exist. And it's, all those things. And that's why the schizophrenic behaves like they're crazy, like they're, weird. Well, of course they are, because you've got this demonic spirit, their foot in the door. And so this poor person is living half in the spirit world and half in the physical world.
Yeah. And Yeah, and in a weakened state, with the pineal gland in a weakened state, and a malevolent entity attached to you, bad things can happen. Back to the pineal gland, and then I really wanted to ask you about soul ages. I got a lot of questions about that. But since we're on the pineal gland here, you mentioned in one of your Ascension videos, one of your series of Ascension videos, about the Schumann resonance, which is basically, for those that aren't familiar, it's basically if you take like a musical note, like B flat, and then you break harmony by maybe an eighth of a half note. So you could barely hear the difference, but you've got a B flat and a little less than B flat, both at the same time. B flat's in one ear and a little less than B flat is in the other. There is a harmonic disharmony, I guess, not meaning to sound redundant, but and it's thought that this disharmony kind of works out that pineal gland. Do you agree with the research that assesses that?
Yeah, absolutely. The Schumann's resonance, because we evolved on this planet, our brains naturally tune themselves with the Schumann's resonance. And because the Schumann's resonance, and for those that don't know, it's basically the heartbeat of the earth. Think of it like that. It's rising in frequency. So it was 7.83 hertz. Now it's upward around 13 to 15 gigahertz. Sorry. Okay. So because our brains are used to that frequency, if your brain doesn't tune up with it, well, you're going to experience a lot of mental and physical discomfort and problems.
Yeah, disharmony. Yeah. Wow. I should encourage listeners to look for Schumann. You know, there are a lot of. It's easy to find, kind of on the internet. And there are a lot of companies that have that resonance. You know, that just plays for you for a good half hour, or a series of meditations, ones, guided meditations that you can just put the headphones on and they do all the work for you. You do all the meditating that actually carry the Schumann resonance with it. And I am just so happy that I have you on. This is just, wow, we could hang out for so long, but time is kind of flying by, and I really wanted to touch on this soul age thing because I find that fascinating, and I haven't seen anybody in all the research that I've done like really 25 years of being interested in metaphysics, anyone explain soul ages as well and as capably as you have in your video series. So I wanted to break up I think there's 5: infant, baby, young, mature, and old. Each one of those has 7 levels. And so I wanted to briefly highlight some of the characteristics or personality traits that each level may have in kind of a short time. So first and foremost, I do want to remind the listeners, this is based on a premise that I think Danny and I both are in perfect harmony in believing that we do live a series of lifetimes, and it's not always as human beings, but the more lifetimes you live, each one is meant for specific lessons, or maybe even a specific lesson. Perhaps in this lifetime you have to really learn to work with others, or work for others, or to love well, or to not find love, or to grieve, or to be the person that people grieve on. I mean, there's a lot of different things, and that's just in human form. But there are 5 different classifications, and the first one is an infant soul. And Danny, if you could share some of the characteristics or traits of an infant soul, reminding our listeners there are 7 levels of each. Like as an infant, there's 7 levels. As a baby, there's 7 levels, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, let's give a brief overview. But an infant soul basically is, just think of it as really raw. It's brand new. It's fresh out of the spirit world. Okay, so early infant souls, they tend to be like your shamans and, native peoples that live around the equator, New Guinea and a lot of African countries and things like that. They still have a very mystical and spiritual experience with the earth and things like that. That's because they're not long out of spirit, so they still have that connection. But toward the end of the infant soul age, they tend to they're struggling with survival. They're learning about survival, because they live in areas where there's floods, there's volcanoes, there's, poisonous snakes, there's everything, all these things out to get them. So they're battling and just learning about survival. So that's what infant soul's all about, is survival. And yeah, there are certain countries around the world, as well, as I say, that have they're predominantly populated by different soul groups. So some of those countries I just said, they're predominantly infant souls, and that's why they all, sort of hang around with each other, because, well, the point is, as I often say, it's like you can imagine a university student that's, sitting for their final exam, and if you allowed a bunch of toddlers, into the 5-year-olds, and you just said to the 5-year-olds, okay, go into that hall where all the students are doing their final exam and just do whatever you want, just go crazy, scream, yell, draw on the walls. Could you imagine how difficult it would be for those students to pass that test, having all those kids running around, playing up and everything. Right. So that's why they're sort of, to a large degree, separated a little bit,
Yeah, so it's kind of like they're just coming into life from the soul world and being very close to going back real quick.
Well, they do. They have very short lives, the infant souls. Well, because they've got a lot to learn very quickly. So, I use the analogy, when you're a kid and you play a video game and, you might get killed in the video game 10 times before suddenly you start to figure it out and you think, hang on, if I don't go into that spot, I won't get killed, I won't die. So the more you play the game, the better you get at it, and you'll learn the different tricks or the rules as you go. And suddenly, when you first started playing the game, your little character gets killed 10, 20 times. But now, after 6 months, you can go through the whole game on one life, without losing a life or anything, because you've learnt the rules and the tricks.
Well,
and the same is said with souls.
Yeah. Well, not the way I play games.
Yeah, okay.
I'm so bad on multiplayer, I won't even go there,
Yeah, oh, fair enough. But yeah, it's just an analogy. But so then moving into the baby souls, by now, souls have got a little bit of experience, like I was saying. They've learnt a few of the pitfalls. And now what they're trying to do is to really do things properly, because before they were sort of uncivilized, now they're learning about civilization, so they want to prove to the world that they can do it right. So baby souls tend to be very, very dogmatic, and it's either black or it's white with them, and they're your typical staunch, in America, there's staunch Republicans and conservatives, that... they're the church leaders and the town mayor and all this sort of stuff. A classic example, as I put in the video, is that was it Jimmy Baker and Tammy Baker? They're classic baby souls, right?
Yeah.
They're impeccably dressed, but not very sophisticated in their dress.
Right.
They like to preach everything to the world, like the rights and the wrongs. But in the background, they're absolutely corrupt themselves, and they do the exact opposite,
Right.
But then they get on TV and cry about it because he generally is sorry for it. But they're like children. That's what they're like. They're like little children, a naughty little child, that knows that they're not supposed to, do something, and they do it anyway. But then when mum and dad finds out, they're all remorseful and they're crying and, But again, it's just part of their learning experience. That's all it is. And I wanted to stress as well, there's no one soul group's better than the other.
Yeah,
okay? There's absolutely not. It's just each soul group is learning a particular lesson.
Yep.
And so it's okay for a baby soul to be like that. They're doing exactly what they're meant to be doing.
Yes,
and
doing it well on their level. And
yes,
and the higher you get in that level, like baby level 1 through 7. Oh, well, actually, I guess up to a 4 through 5 or whatever. Is just the more progressed you get in that genre of souldom.
That's right.
Is there any the predominant countries where you might find baby souls?
Yeah, there is. Well, not whole countries. There's areas. Think of it more as areas. So the textbook area, of course, is the Bible Belt in Middle America there. Where you've got a lot of fundamentalist Christians and things.
Right.
But then in the Middle East, where you've got jihadists, basically any fundamentalist, zealots, that sort of thing, where you see a conglomeration of those sort of religious zealots. Religion, the dogmatic religions, where they're very strict and it's black or it's white, that sort of thing, that comes out of the baby soul phenomenon. That's who creates these religions, that's who enforces them, and that's who follows them and believes in them in most cases.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, there is no one better than the other.
No,
the one there is more of, this whole thing goes on a bell curve. So the infant and old souls are about 7% each. The baby and the mature are closer to about 15 to 20% each. But the young is the heart of the bell, and the young soul is the predominant souls, I think, in the overall picture. Would you not agree? And could you describe the young for us?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, young souls rule the world. They really do. The world that we know at the moment hasn't always been this way. But so the young soul's all about power, amassing material things, success, at any cost sort of thing. Your typical young soul is like a yuppie, that classic yuppie where it's all about getting ahead in life, full of energy,
right.
Making money.
Do you know I still won't buy a cell phone because of that? I was anti-yuppie back in the... We used to call ourselves yuffies, which was young urban failures, because we just had more fun that way.
Well, that's right. but that's the thing with young souls. But, young souls are important to the world too, because they're the ones, like if you've got a charity and you really want to raise money for this charity, I can guarantee you that person in your group that's out there promoting it, they're printing flyers, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're full of energy, that's probably a young soul. So young souls are really good at building stuff, getting stuff done. In the material world. So empires were built by young souls. Cities were built by young souls. So young souls, that's in their positive realm, but in their negative realm, they will go and chop down every tree in a forest because, they can make a buck. They'll continue to use fossil fuels because there's money in it, even though it's killing the planet. That's irrelevant to them. I should note too, at this point, each of the soul groups I've described up till this point, they do not understand what true love is, as in a relationship or unconditional love. They literally do not understand what it is. So you'll find that a young soul, their partners are trophies. They'll say that they love someone or they're in love, but they're not in a true sense. Really what it is, it's a possession. And so they'll become overbearing and jealous types and things like that because their pretty young wife it's just the same as their pretty car. There's no difference in their mind. Their possessions, and there's something to admire and something to stroke, but, that's when you hear these terrible things like, the wife develops breast cancer or something, so the guy leaves her for a 20-year-old.
We know a few people like that, sure.
Yeah, well, that's a classic young soul reaction. And what's interesting, too, is souls come together to learn, to help teach each other and learn from each other. And in that sort of scenario, it's quite normal and a nice segue because we go into mature souls.
Right.
Mature the woman in that scenario that developed breast cancer, in order to give the husband the opportunity to show compassion, to learn about compassion or to learn about giving, she is almost certainly going to be a mature soul, right?
Yep.
So she's an older soul that's coming down to teach the younger souls, and that's a common thing. So early mature souls, the best way to describe them is teenage angst, right? They are always like, they're suddenly for the first time they can experience love. And for that reason, it's also the first time that they start to look inward at themselves. They start to question themselves, their motivations, and it's the first time that they can see things from other people's point of view. Okay, so they can put themselves in your shoes to understand how you're feeling, and that's very important shift in the whole soul age thing, right? It's very important. But for that reason, in the early mature ages, they tend to be, a lot of them are alcoholics and drug addicts and things because they just can't cope. It's like sensory overload, literally sensory overload. And because, they start then looking at themselves and going and criticizing themselves and thinking they're not good enough and they're not this and they're not that. And so then they, the first, second, third levels where you get a lot of drug addicts and alcoholics, but it's also the level too where a lot of our most famous musicians and writers and poets and movie directors and things like that, they come from that group, right? Because they're so in tune with their feelings and other people's emotions. When you hear a love song that's written and you think it's been written for you, I mean, that's a classic mature soul thing. They can do that. They can write stuff.
They sound like a lot of fun to hang out with, Those second and third level. They got music and drugs, and they're good thinkers, and I like those guys. Yeah. Okay,
but they also want to save the world, but they want to save the world. They're all the, save the whales, save the forests, save everything. They always want to...
They have passion.
Yes, they have their heart on their sleeve.
Yeah. Okay, we're running out of time, so we got to brush on my favorite category in like a minute. Tell us about old souls.
Quickly, old souls, like you said before, they don't really want to be here anymore. They've been there, done that. They're learning about detaching from the physical plane as well as people in their lives, things like that. Doesn't mean they don't love you, but they can detach from you, and but they're also really bad on self-criticism and things like that. So they've got to learn to love themselves. Once an old soul learns to love themselves, detach from the physical plane, then they don't come here anymore. They don't need to come here anymore. They stop incarnating on the physical plane.
Oh, that's me in a nutshell. Boy, this hour went by so fast. I hope you'd consider coming back sometime because I sure loved talking with you.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to.
All right, and I really encourage our listeners to go to YouTube and look for the channel called Path to Ascension. That's ASCENSION, to find out all sorts of magnificent things from this wonderful, beautiful man. Danny Searle, thank you so much. It's Tuesday morning where you are, so I thank you for taking your morning out to enhance our evening. And I encourage our listeners to join us again, Beyond the Norm. 2 weeks from now, we'll have Dr. William Tiller, Professor Emeritus from Stanford University Physics Department, who will assess that consciousness may actually be a real form of energy and could indeed transcend life. Thank you for joining us here on Beyond the Norm. This is Chip Reichenthal, sending you love, blessings, and grateful thanks for listening. Keeping the Spirits Alive is next with John Tobin and myself, the special guest Bill Oberst Jr. Join us in just a couple of minutes. Good night.